One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
It's the only sad thing. I want to know what happens next.
We're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one, eh?
It's a fact of life that every story, even the popular ones, must end. Times change, tastes shift, and as a result, the magic of a story fades over the years. But every now and then, something truly magical can happen. The stars align, tastes shift back, and once every generation or so, an old story comes back to life.
So where are we going?
Further than we've ever gone before.
From its first appearance on television in 1963, Doctor Who proved itself a milestone in sci-fi and pop culture at large, from its diversity behind the scenes, to its subversion of the evil invader tropes of other atomic age sci-fi, to its ability to evolve with each new decade. While the series would go on to build an impressive 26-year run on the air, slowly pivoting into more silliness and spectacle, decades of mismanagement, mounting critiques from inside and out, and a general aimlessness in the show's later years led to its eventual removal from television in 1989. But even as the series continued to lay dormant, ongoing revival efforts gained steam. And in 2005, all of that unyielding passion finally paid off in the form of a new Doctor for a new decade. Aw yeah, baby, now we're getting to the good stuff. Because if classic Doctor Who was a product of the terror and wonder of the atomic age, its revival shows what happens when the timeless ideas at its heart confront the fears and fantasies of the modern era. Here we will explore how the show returned, how it evolved into something even greater, and how it secured its legacy as a boundless, timeless sci-fi gem. Fittingly, for a show about time travel, Doctor Who has an amazing history of its own. Like I stated in my previous video, which you can check out on my channel right now, the series began as an educational program and steadily evolved into TV's answer to sci-fi blockbusters, with the Doctor subverting the image of the hostile alien with his boundless intelligence and empathy. Was this an intentional message about humanizing the other? It's hard to say, but the results definitely spoke for themselves. Over time, the Doctor evolved from supporting character to leading man, helped along by the stable of rotating companions and the many actors who brought their respective visions of the character to life. Sadly, while the show's premise and scope evolved over time, it was still firmly grounded by the BBC's limited budget, and was eventually eclipsed by a massive Hollywood sci-fi revival. The show's staff continued to push boundaries through political and social commentary, but 2 decades of shrinking viewership and mismanagement behind the scenes eventually caught up. But even with the show no longer in development, official and fan efforts to revive it persisted. This would eventually lead to a 1996 TV film that would serve as a backdoor pilot, starring Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor. Internationally co-produced between Fox, Universal Pictures, and BBC Worldwide, it's a pretty weird jumble of tones and ideas. Probably the result of trying to hook mainstream audiences in the UK and US at the expense of longtime cult fans. And while the film-level budget definitely does its effects justice, up to a point anyway, it's also chock full of bizarre choices. Like, say, having Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor mowed down in a hail of Uzi fire. Yeah, not the best send-off for a fan favorite. And Eric Roberts as the Master ain't so great either. But in spite of the film's poor reception in the US and the UK, the series' cult audiences continued to rally for a more definitive revival, bolstered by new licensed media and its massive place in pop culture. And in 2005, 16 years after its cancellation, Doctor Who returned to the BBC under the vision of showrunner Russell T Davies. Having made a name in television with series like 1999's Queer as Folk and 2005's Casanova, Davies was also a lifelong fan of Doctor Who, spending most of the 90s pitching a revival of the series to the broadcaster.
They'd phone me up and say, "Do you want to write A Tale of Two Cities?" And I'd say, "No, I want to write Doctor Who."
Davies would reflect.
It was the one program that encouraged you to make up stories. When I was 8, walking home from school down Hendrefullen Avenue, I always used to think I could turn around the corner and the TARDIS would be there. The TARDIS could land in the everyday world, and no other science fiction program could do that. That's when I fell in love with it. I was transfixed.
Despite rejections in 1999 and 2002, Davies' pitch would finally see the light of day in 2003, thanks to an intervention from BBC One controllers Lauren Hegasey and Jane Tranter, as well as head of drama Julie Gardner. After obtaining a 13-episode commitment, the revamped series would begin production in 2004, with Davies serving as head writer and executive producer to maximize his creative control over the series. Working alongside writers Stephen Moffat, Mark Gatiss, Robert Shearman, and Paul Cornell, Davies set about making improvements to Doctor Who's format, doubling episode lengths from 25 minutes to 50 and tightening the pacing of each story. The new series also benefited from healthier effects budgets, leading to more intricate alien designs and a reliance on CGI to better sell the scope of its adventures. And finally, the series' music, including its iconic theme, was given triumphant new life through composer Murray Gold, who used a mix of digital synths and orchestra to lend everything an operatic grandeur. I'm just saying, there's Doctor Who with Murray Gold, and then there's everything else. Just like the original's pilot, the series opens in then-present-day London, following teenage shop assistant Rose Tyler as she crosses paths with the Doctor in the middle of his own mission to thwart an alien invasion. Soon, Rose becomes torn between her mundane life at home with her mother Jackie and boyfriend Mickey, and a life of adventure alongside the mysterious Doctor. While it builds heavily on the history of its predecessors, leaving some stuff out obviously, Doctor Who under Davies also acts as a jumping-on point for new viewers, using the show's lengthy absence to remystify and reinterpret its mythology for a new decade. This wasn't a world driven by fears of nuclear war or invasion, but one held captive by an onslaught of junk TV, invasive technology, and cheap thrills, desensitized to the wars being waged around them. As such, Davies' new series becomes a clear commentary on Britain's part in the global war on terror, with new enemies taking the form of out-of-touch politicians, war-profiteering billionaires, and fellow wanderers pushed to the unthinkable in the name of survival.
I'm a very political writer. I always have been,
States Davies.
Every single year in Doctor Who, I either killed or deposed a prime minister. In Series 1, I blew up Downing Street with a missile. I kind of engage with politics by not writing crime. I don't write crime, but ordinary people engaging with the world, that's what politics is. This show is just putting it more center stage than normal. It's a long-winded way of me saying I'm worried about the world. In a sense, I always have been.
At the center of this new vision is a more stripped-back, haunted take on the Doctor, brought to life through veteran actor Christopher Eccleston. While he's still brimming with the charm and brilliance of his past incarnations, Eccleston's Doctor is also noticeably darker and more conflicted, struggling with his role in a war across time that decimated civilizations and left him the lone survivor of his race. The idea of a time war has always been a mainstay in the series' history, from Alan Moore's comics for Doctor Who Monthly to the slew of Eighth Doctor adventure novels written before the show's return. But what distinguishes the revival's take is the cultural context behind it. Through his guilt and rage, Eccleston's Doctor becomes the vehicle for a generation sapped of its hope by an endless war, torn between their violent present and the memory of a more hopeful past. There's a real sense that something has been lost or broken inside the Ninth Doctor, with each encounter highlighting the parallels between himself and his enemies.
The Daleks have failed! Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth! Why don't you just die?
You would make a good Dalek.
It's not all gloom and doom, though. While Eccleston's Doctor can verge on broody and cynical, the series counters this cynicism through Rose, an average girl who rejects the hopelessness of the world to become something greater. Companions have always played a major part in Doctor Who, usually serving as wide-eyed sidekicks to the alien man of mystery. And while that's still true here, Rose's arc from aimless teen to heroic co-lead ends up flipping this dynamic, inspiring the Doctor to reclaim his humanity and reject the violence that's haunted him for so long.
Prove yourself, Doctor. What are you, coward or killer?
Coward. Any day.
This new approach to the show and its characters was an instant hit with audiences, many of whom were captivated by Eccleston's authentic, vulnerable take on their favorite character. But of course, it wouldn't be Doctor Who without disastrous behind-the-scenes shuffling. Despite the success of the show and his character, Eccleston would leave after one season due to disagreements over the on-set culture and conditions. And although his absence is felt across the rest of Davies' tenure, the team would use this change to make another parallel to the classic series, bringing back the concept of regeneration and kicking off a larger arc for the hero.
So where was I? Oh, that's right. Barcelona.
To many, myself included, David Tennant is the definitive Doctor, and it's not hard to see why. If Eccleston's performance was a look into what war can take from us, Tennant's is focused around reclaiming that loss, turning all of his guilt and pain into action. Naturally, this led to a more traditionally heroic, swashbuckling take on the character, and I mean that literally. He has a sword fight in, his first episode. With this new Doctor came another major shift in storytelling, as the series began building longer plots that connected across its episodes. Building off of Tennant's natural charisma, this Doctor had much deeper connections with his companions, some leaving the TARDIS better off, others not so much. Ten's relationship with Rose would evolve into something more romantic, highlighting the tension between his desire to live as a human and his legacy as the last of his species. And though the romance was ultimately doomed, with Billie Piper exiting as a series regular after season 2, this newly deepened humanity would keep evolving with each new companion. Freema Agyeman's Martha Jones, the first post-Rose companion, highlights Ten's failings as a mentor, with his fixation on the past blinding him to Martha's own feelings until she leaves the TARDIS. By contrast, Catherine Tate's Donna Noble is just the kick in the pants this Doctor needs, with her boundless compassion and self-assuredness keeping him connected to the people he's always trying to save. Just try to tell me Volcano Day isn't a character-defining moment. You can't. This fluid, reactive take on the Doctor was the perfect foundation for the show's new stories, honoring the series' vast history while bringing it into the present day. Fan-favorite companions like Sarah Jane Smith and K9 would return, and many classic enemies would follow, given horrifying new life through the lens of modern society. Mainstays like the Cybermen, the Sontarans, and the Daleks would all return as images of humanity corrupted by war and technology, while episodes like New Earth, Gridlock, and The Impossible Planet explore futures overrun by unchecked industrialization. Even the Doctor's past ties to the government and the military are reworked under Davies, with the familiar faces of UNIT giving way to the authoritarian Torchwood Institute. Dedicating himself to restoring what he's lost, the Doctor isn't just at odds with rogue invaders, he's fighting society itself. And nothing illustrates that better than the series' take on one of his most iconic villains.
Just stop! Just think! Use my name.
Master. I'm sorry.
Tough!
Introduced back in the 70s as the dark counterpart to the Doctor, the Master has had an evolution of his own over the decades, growing from Bond villain to walking corpse to whatever's going on with Eric Roberts. However, in Davies' hands, and with a brilliantly campy performance by John Sim, the dynamic between the Doctor and the Master takes center stage. The two survivors become the faces of a post-war schism, a schism that starts to weigh on Ten as his mission to save everyone pushes him towards the authoritarianism that destroyed his people.
I've done this sort of thing before. In small ways, say some little people, but never someone as important as you. Oh, I'm good.
Little people? What, like Mia and Yuri? Who decides they're so unimportant? You?
For a long time now, I thought I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm the winner.
It's a layered critique of the Doctor as a conscientious objector marked by war. If he can't walk the line between hero and soldier, he's destined to become what he fears most. Celebrated for its intricate storytelling, fantastic effects work, and lovable characters, Davies' tenure on Doctor Who is the definitive distillation of the original, setting the adventurous spirit of the classic years against the wonders and fears of the modern day. The show's broader commentary on the corrupting influence of nationalism and war still feels powerful today, as does its conflicted but hopeful take on its hero. By making the Doctor into a surrogate for the audience, Davies is able to channel a nation's post-war guilt into a powerful call to action, encouraging viewers to embrace compassion over violence, even if it leaves them an outsider. Fittingly, Davies' last few episodes are a bittersweet celebration of everything the writer and his Doctor have built together, giving every companion one last goodbye and letting the hero finally triumph over his demons, renouncing his people's war and saving companion Wilf at the cost of his own life. Tennant's own exit from the series is the perfect finale to this era, burning away the show's wartime roots to make way for something new, ambitious, and exciting. All we had to do was strap in and enjoy the ride. By the time Davies and Tennant exited the series in 2010, Doctor Who had undergone a massive resurgence in popularity, with its presence on platforms like Netflix and BBC America finally giving it an international audience. While the show was put on hiatus between its season finale in 2008 and the End of Time specials in 2010, the BBC was quick to capitalize on its success, elevating Davies' collaborator Stephen Moffat to showrunner alongside a new writer's room complete with big names like Richard Curtis and Neil Gaiman. Having started on the series under Davies, Moffat's stories often touch on similar ideas, namely the pull between the mundane and the fantastic, the dehumanization of war, and the hero's arc from alien outsider to caretaker of the universe. What sets it apart, however, is Moffat's approach to tone and storytelling, which lean more into romantic fantasy than hard sci-fi. Long story short,
Bit fairy tale.
by the time Moffat had taken over as showrunner, the world had undergone another cultural shift of its own. We were removed from the paranoia of the War on Terror, but its after effects remained everywhere, leading to a general cynicism in culture and media. There was a desire to return to a more innocent view of the world, and through his next Doctor, Moffat set about doing just that.
For me, Doctor Who literally is a fairy tale,
muses Moffat.
It's not that it's like the old fairy tales or that it resembles them, it's the modern equivalent. A man who fights monsters but never becomes one. Every time it cleaves towards that, it's very strong. There's something fundamental in its DNA that makes it a children's program and makes children of everyone who watches it. If you're still a grown-up by the end of that opening music, you've not been paying attention.
Picking up right after Tennant's exit, the series follows the freshly regenerated 11th Doctor as he crash lands the TARDIS throughout the life of Amelia Pond and her long-suffering fiancé Rory, played by Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill. Having moved on from Britain's post-war anxiety, for the moment at least, Matt Smith's performance is a complete inversion of Eccleston and Tennant's, with his aloof, hyperactive energy crafting a character who revels in his alien status, which fits nicely with how Amy first sees him, a fairy tale character brought to life. With this new Doctor comes a move into more abstract storytelling, focusing on original creatures and paranormal phenomena drawing from gothic fiction and fairy tales. Personally, I think it's a really cool new direction, leading to plenty of incredible episodic stories. Unfortunately though, the earlier half of Moffat's time lacks the cohesion of Davies' meditations on war and redemption. There are still long-running stories present, with plots like the crack in the universe and the Doctor's death set up at the start of each season, but the payoffs don't really come together in a satisfying way, often hand-waved away by last-minute plot twists or paradoxes. Moments like the reveal of River's identity are incredible, but swiftly undercut when you realize that this is all the closure we get for these stories. I guess this means Amy and Rory aren't going to save their baby? Or maybe they already did? It's all a little bit
wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
Not helped by the late intro of Jenna Coleman's Clara Oswald, a companion with her own heap of complicated lore, tied to another pretty forgettable big bad. However, the end to Amy and Rory's story is a beautiful example of how this formula works, kicking off a larger arc that finally gives this take on the Doctor a voice. Through the specials Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor, Moffat gives his hero a series of sweeping highs, restoring his homeworld and erasing the devastation of the Time War. Not a perfect metaphor, but it's exactly the kind of cathartic story people were craving after decades of terror and guilt. But of course, it's easy to say we've grown. Proving it is a journey of its own. In sharp contrast to Smith's performance, Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor starts out cold, calculating, and downright terrifying, with episodes like Deep Breath, Mummy on the Orient Express, and Death in Heaven laying his inner darkness bare. It's as if all that malice Smith's been tamping down has finally broken through, as Moffat uses the Doctor's lengthy, inconsistent history to ask the question, is he really good? Is he even capable of being good?
I'm the Doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years, and not all of them were good.
Capaldi's first season is still a bit of a mixed bag, with Moffat's fairy tale influences chafing against his darker hero, but seasons 9 and 10 build a more defined journey for the character. Grappling with the choices necessary to see himself as good, Season 9 explores the Doctor's mercy and cruelty in equal measure through a series of mirroring two-part stories, climaxing in the spectacular Heaven Sent and Hell Bent, with 12 nearly tearing the universe apart to save Clara from a terrible fate. While some elements like the hybrid subplot still don't come together in a satisfying way, sorry Steve, you'll get there someday, the fairy tale angle finally gets its payoff, with good triumphing over evil through a simple, powerful phrase. What follows is an incredible reward to 3 seasons worth of storytelling, as Capaldi's Doctor grows into a figure with boundless compassion, taking on a parental relationship with Pearl Mackey's Bill Potts, and working to cultivate a better side out of the returning Master, now played by the amazing Michelle Gomez. The inconsistencies of the character's past don't diminish or contradict this direction, but enhance it, showing how even when we lose our way, we still have the hope that we can grow into something better, and the responsibility to be kind instead of cruel.
I'm not doing this because I want to beat someone, or because I hate someone, or because I want to blame someone. It's not because it's fun. God knows it's not because it's easy. It's not even because it works, because it hardly ever does. I do what I do because it's right, because it's decent, and above all, it's kind.
Fittingly, Capaldi's final moments as the character are another meditation on how far he's come, teaming him up with one of his earliest incarnations as both work to save the life of a soldier from his impending death. Despite its high concept, Twice Upon a Time is pretty sparse on plot and action, acting as more of a coda to Moffat's thesis on his hero and the series as a whole.
Perhaps it's just some bloke wandering around, putting everything right when it goes wrong.
Well, that would be a nice story, wouldn't it?
That would be the best.
But the real world is not a fairy tale.
Just like the Doctor's regenerations, real life doesn't get any easier. The world is full of darkness, and in many cases, that darkness can be all-consuming. And yet, good prevails. Why? Because we believe in it. We believe in it so much that we make the impossible happen.
You were right, you know? The universe generally fails to be a fairy tale. That's where we come in.
The special setting in the moments before the Christmas truce of 1914 is another inspired choice, tying the fairy tale of the Doctor to our own desire for a better world. All in all, Moffat's era as showrunner is far from perfect, with the mystery box storytelling of the earlier seasons derailing its overarching plots. But it's still a beautiful look into the heart of its central character and his unending struggle to be better. The series' cyclical nature means that the Doctor is doomed to sacrifice himself again and again, but it's our belief that gives that sacrifice meaning. In spite of our messy history, we can still believe in fantastic, magical ideas. And as long as that belief endures, so will Doctor Who.
Oh, brilliant.
Just over a decade after its return to television, Doctor Who was once again at a crossroads. The ambition of Moffat's years as showrunner had launched the show into a new level of critical acclaim, pushing the format of sci-fi through its storytelling and redefining the journey of its central character. And while not everyone clicked with Moffat's take on the Doctor, it was still a tough act to follow. After all, how do you build on a decade's worth of long-form storytelling? This next chapter would arrive through incoming showrunner Chris Chibnall, famous for his work on TV series like Born and Bred, Broadchurch, Doctor Who spin-off series Torchwood, and a handful of episodes under Davies and Moffat's tenures. As both a lifelong fan and critic of the series, Chibnall envisioned this next era as a modernized return to form, bringing back the show's educational subtext and returning to the tried and true Monster of the Week format, brought to a new level of prestige thanks to a massive increase in budgets and production design. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that this is the best Doctor Who has ever looked. Doesn't mean I'm a fan of the new TARDIS though. Kinda looks like a big salt lamp to me. This era also saw the introduction of Jodie Whittaker, the first woman to step into the role of the Doctor, bolstered by the biggest stable of companions since the classic era. In place of the classic two-lead cast, the crew, including Tosin Cole's Ryan, Mandip Gill's Yaz, and Bradley Walsh's Graham, act as one big unit, with their ongoing journeys reshaping their relationships to the Doctor and each other. It's a pretty cool concept, at least in theory. While Yaz and Graham get plenty to work with story to story, Ryan comes off a bit undefined, with his struggles against his disability downplayed in favor of something more cliché.
I'm gonna look out for you, son.
I'm not a kid.
Later seasons would improve on this dynamic, giving Graham and Ryan a satisfying exit and streamlining the cast through John Bishop's Dan. Unfortunately, the same inconsistencies would plague many of Chibnall's stories as showrunner. Some episodes like Resolution, War of the Sontarans, Village of the Angels, and Spyfall give fantastic new takes on established characters, while others like Kerblam, Orphan 55, and Rosa chafe against their real-world allegories, leading to some confusing, if not downright offensive messaging.
We were here. We're part of the story, part of history.
Oh, no, I don't want to be part of this.
We have to. I'm sorry. We have to not help her.
But arguably the most polarizing change of Chibnall's tenure comes through The Timeless Children, an episode that reveals a secret history between the Doctor and the larger creation myth of the Time Lords. Some criticisms of the episode, like how it frames the Doctor as more of a predestined chosen one archetype, are valid. Others, who argue that it takes away the Doctor's central drive as a character, seem to miss the larger philosophy behind the episode and Chibnall's story at large. That who you were doesn't determine who you become. If Moffat argues that anyone can be the Doctor, Chibnall firmly adds that the Doctor can be anyone, regardless of who they are, what they look like, or where they came from. When reflecting on his larger plans for the series, the showrunner would state, "Some of the inspiration for that was personal, because it's an adoption myth, and I was adopted. The thing about where you're from versus who you are, that's really personal to me. I wanted to excavate what the Doctor knew about themselves and ask, what if that's not the whole story? Because there are so many incredible gaps. When you disrupt that sense of knowing where you come from, you can take the Doctor to all sorts of new places. I was just digging deeper into what was already there, making it a personal and emotional story." Unfortunately, if the showrunner had plans to further explore this idea, we never really get to see it. Aside from its divisive reception, Chibnall's take on Doctor Who was plagued with behind-the-scenes production issues. The new era saw the biggest writer's room in the show's history, a pretty hefty challenge for someone new to the position of showrunner. And while Season 11 operated under normal conditions, where ideas and scripts were nurtured in pre-production, Seasons 12 and 13 were produced under the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in rushed or even unfinished scripts as the entire crew struggled to adapt to new set protocols. That we made Doctor Who at all during the past 2 years is a miracle, Chibnall admits. There was a point around April or May 2020 where it looked like we'd have to call it a day after 2 series. We had to reimagine the production of the show, reimagine the narrative structure of the show. But what I loved about it is it brings creative benefits, but also risk. Creative risk is where Doctor Who should live, I think. And not everybody's gonna agree with that. While it's still fairly polarizing to many, I've actually come around to Chibnall's larger ideas for Doctor Who, and how it untethers the character from any fixed origin without kicking over what came before. If anything, Chibnall and Whittaker's final special is a celebration of the Doctor's entire history, their power as a timeless icon who has touched generations of people, both in and out of fiction.
You are not finished.
We are not finished.
Now celebrating its 60th year, Doctor Who is on the verge of changing again, with Russell T Davies returning as showrunner after 14 years away from the series. And while Davies is keen on giving one last look at his past stories, the new series, billed as Season 1 of the Whoniverse, seems more ambitious and expansive than ever. That's the real magic that makes Doctor Who so timeless over half a century after it began. Its ability to change, to build on what came before, to give wonderful new life to the past, and run headlong towards a brighter, beautiful future. Thanks so much for checking out today's video, the second part in my ongoing retrospective on Doctor Who. I've been planning to cover the revival series since I started digging into the show's history, and it's really cool to see how this new era has impacted the larger story of the show, from its creators to the kinds of stories they've been able to tell. While I think Davies' time is always going to be my favorite, I've really grown to love how Moffat and Chibnall have been able to add their own perspectives to the story. I'm even more excited to see Davies come back, now that he's had some time to grow as a showrunner. Is there any part of this new era you're excited about? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel out a lot. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Carol Ann Brenneman, The Comics Cave, Dom DeFelice, Kirk Ireland, and my patrons, who are helping me to grow this channel and continue doing what I love, and hopefully what you love too. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and...
Allons-y!